everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Sleep Like a Boss podcast. I have a very special guest today, Laurie Santos. Hi, Laurie.
Hey, Annika.
It's a pleasure to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm just gonna, before we start, give you guys a little bit of background on Laurie. So you know who she is. She's gonna dive into that a little more too. And then we're gonna talk about tapping and sleep today, which I'm super excited about. And let me give you a little bit of background on why we have Laurie on the show for this. So Laurie Santos is an internationally accredited EFT practitioner, so emotional freedom technique tapping practitioner, and she's a manifestation coach. And she is originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, so from the US. And she mastered, get this, in justice and criminology. And she served as a federal probation officer for nearly 10 years. And in 2002, she discovered the world of life coaching and felt called to certify as a coach and leave the world of law enforcement behind. Laurie's had her coaching practice for 20 years now, and she's lived around the world, including countries like Spain, Kuwait, Angola, and the Netherlands. And she runs her practice full-time out of her home and teaches her 3-step tap, visualize, and magnetize method to her clients and groups. And so they can overcome feelings like anxiety, fear, confidence issues, as well as imposter syndrome as a way to manifest dreams with ease, accuracy, and joy. And Laurie lives with her Dutch husband in the Netherlands, and they also have 2 cats that are from Kuwait, and she serves in her free time. Yeah. What a bio, Laurie. And maybe to quickly give the audience that background, you are my life coach.
Proudly, with honor and gratitude. One of my favorite clients you are.
I tap with Laurie on a regular basis, and I wanted her to come on the show because I actually only found tapping about 2 years ago when the pandemic started, when everything was overwhelmed. When, John Hopkins University started to have that world map with the case numbers, and it exploded. And I was checking the internet every 5 minutes, which was totally the wrong thing to do. And I got this overwhelm. And for some reason on the internet, it was Marie Forleo, which some of you might know. She's an online business coach, had a tapping session with somebody who's called Tim Ortner, and he's one of the online tapping people. And she just wanted to help people through this overwhelm. And I was like, well, I'm just going to try this. So I sat there and they walked, and he just guided us through a session to calm the overwhelm in that situation with the pandemic. And it was mind blowing. And then I found you through another online coach who we both worked with. And you were like, I'm a tapping coach. Does anybody want to start tapping? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to try this again. And I find it's life-changing. And I think for people who have sleep issues, because that's what we work with, right? Sleep issues, a lot of times, stress, burnout, anxiety, all those things. I personally think it's a fantastic tool. And we're going to dive into that today. Yeah. So before we do that, and before we go into what tapping is and what it does and how is it good for you, how in the world did you get from being a probation officer into life coaching?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And it really is the starting point, isn't it? Because much like I think a lot of your listeners fall into that bracket probably of type A personality, really career focused, highly driven, performance-based, ambitious. I fell into that category myself. So it was really interesting when I was going through high school and that sort of thing. I had no idea what I wanted to do. But my parents were pushing me like, you've got to go to university and get your master's and this sort of thing. And I felt really confused and stuck because it was like, yeah, but in what? What should I study? So when I ended up going for my college, I had just put down on my application English because I was good at it. I enjoyed it. I loved literature. And then that took me on to this journey in my 4 years at university of still trying to figure out who I was, in essence, separate, I guess, of my family. I didn't have it down then, I didn't know deep down. I need to figure out my own path. It sort of kept finding me through a lot of experimenting and going, oh, I really like this class and I really like this class. And in the end, I ended up with a Bachelor of Science in Anthropology, which, what the heck was I going to do with that? I loved it, but what was I going to do with it? And I was pretty clear that I didn't want to go and do the PhD route in anthropology. So my father, who was a juvenile probation officer all my life, said to me, I think it must have been about a year after I had finished my degree, hey, the probation department is hiring, where he was working. So he said, I really suggest that you apply. And when he sent me the application, I was gobsmacked because I saw the requirements were you could have a degree in anthropology and sociology. And I was like, what? Like, my degree is actually considered here? So I applied. And I became then a county probation officer in Alameda County, where I'm from, back in the San Francisco Bay Area. And that was quite fascinating because I was working with all kinds of personalities and all kinds of different criminal offenders, from those who had been into gangs, those who had committed, really heavy crimes. And then I got the first stalking caseload when the stalking law went into effect.
Mhm.
I think it was around 1998 in California, which of course I was like, I don't want this caseload. What if these stalkers want to stalk me? And that did happen. Ultimately, though, the good news in all of that is I fell in love with, I always knew I loved the law and I loved debating and I loved research. I just wasn't sure I wanted to go the attorney or lawyer route. But as I was already about 2.5 years into being a probation officer, part of our work is going to court, oftentimes every single day, and interacting with the judges and the attorneys. And so I said, I think I'd like to, I'm ready now to continue to pursue my education. And that's when I said I'm ready to apply to law school, but I had missed the deadline that year. So I decided to get my master's in justice instead. So I was pursuing my master's in justice in criminology while I was already an officer. And then meanwhile, I said, you know what? I got to keep on climbing. Let's go and become a federal probation officer. And that I did while also finishing up my master's. And when you work for the federal government in the United States, you oftentimes work a lot of hours, depending on which department you work for. And as a federal probation officer, I mean, when we were hired, we were told, hey, you're not going to be keeping regular hours. And are you okay with that? And you might work quite far. You might live very far from the office where you're put in. And that was the case with me. So I had long commutes, really like about 4 hours a day. And then when I had my master's classes on Tuesday, Thursdays, I was, driving back at home at 10 o'clock at night after I had left at 5 a.m. And I was done. I mean, I was just done. I was giving my blood over to this work, although I did love it. I felt like I was good at it. I felt like I was effective in it. But I kept feeling like I had a dream inside. I felt like I was meant to do something else. I didn't know exactly what that was. And I kind of felt like it was delivered to me this one day. It was like 2000. It was right when I finished my master's, actually. It was around 2002. This magazine I was reading just opened up to the middle of an article called What is Life Coaching? And I remember I said out loud, yeah, what is life coaching? That sounds super cool. This article was fantastic. I wish I could find it. I've literally searched for it all these years later. It was in Shape magazine, and it described exactly what it was and how it benefited people and how it just helped the regular person. And I felt like that's what I was already doing as an officer with my offenders, but I wanted to broaden my horizons and not only work with criminal offenders. And so at the end of the article, there were all of these coaching schools that had been accredited by the International Coaching Federation. And so I applied, I registered, I got signed up. I went to 2 different coaching schools. I didn't realize that the extra bonus of this was my life was going to be changed. My mindset was going to be changed. I just thought I was going to learn how to be a coach, but no, you become a student and you become a coachee, and I was put into the hot seat, obviously, with my master coaches and others who were learning alongside of me. And along the way, I was like, I am different. This is radically transforming my life. And I felt really empowered and realized I didn't have to think the thoughts I was thinking. And through, the tapping, through the power of visualization, through all of these tools I was gaining, I realized, hey, I can use this as a toolkit to go pursue my dreams and stop this perpetual emotional burnout that I was going through with my last career. And so when I finished, well, no, I didn't. Actually, even before I finished my coaching certifications, I started hosting sample sessions out of my home while I was still a federal probation officer. And I started to garner clients. And I had my part-time practice for about 3 years while I was still a federal officer. And then finally in 2006, I went 100% full-time. And my extreme dream was to be digital, at that time, to go live abroad and have my coaching practice and basically model the way for the people that I wanted to work with. And so that is what I did. In 2007, I moved to Spain and Portugal, and then ultimately the crisis happened, and that's a whole other story, but I got to go even more overseas and live in the Middle East for 8 years and Africa. And that's how it all started, was through an article.
Wow.
I know, right?
Great. That is such a, I find it such
and that's a bit of a long story, but that is the story.
But that is great. And how, so, and tapping was then part of your life coaching.
Yeah, so that's another interesting journey. So when I finished my coactive coaching certification, I think it was shortly after I finished, I learned about EFT tapping, emotional freedom techniques, which was created by Gary Craig. And I didn't go immediately into the certification of that. I started to use it with myself by working with another coach who had been trained in it. And I was blown away how fast I could move through a crisis or an emergency or just pain, whether that was heartbreak or that was physical pain. It just, again, was radically life changing. And one of the things that always felt important for me was that every year I continue with my own education as a coach. So by doing that, I went and got certified in several different things, from fish philosophy facilitation to EFT tapping and to becoming a Reiki master as well. And ultimately what I've done now after 20 years in practice is realize that my primary focus is what's called energy psychology. So everything that I work with, whether it's tapping, visualizing, human design, which is one of my other favorite tools to use, all has to do with energy psychology. And so looking at your personal energy system, we're all energy, we all have electricity running through us. Our thoughts are electricity. And if that gets imbalanced, how can we recalibrate it so that way you can live your best life, you can manifest your dreams, you can have fantastic sleep, your hormones are in balance as well, along with your emotions. And so tapping came a little bit later, but not that much later. And then I went through all of the certifications for that as well.
So, and because you kind of just touched on it a bit, but can you explain a bit what tapping is and how it works?
Yeah. So tapping, the real word behind it is emotional freedom techniques. And Gary Craig was the creator of emotional freedom techniques. He actually streamlined a system from a clinical psychologist called thought field therapy. That clinical psychologist was Dr. Roger Callahan. But basically what EFT does is it's a tapping technique. A lot of people call it emotional acupuncture. We have meridians that run through our bodies, which are energy pathways. Things can obstruct those meridians and put them out of balance. And when your meridians are out of balance, you might lack good decision making, let's say, or feel like you don't have clarity or confidence or focus. You may have a recurring pattern or theme or behavior that keeps surfacing that you actually don't want, but you continuously default to, and you might not know why. And that could be because your energy system has gotten out of balance. Most of the time, that energy system has gotten out of balance because of some unprocessed emotions. Oftentimes it's trauma. It could be a phobia. Oftentimes, believe it or not, even past life experiences, if you believe in that sort of philosophy. And what tapping does is we tap on various points on the body that activate and balance those meridian points. It's said in EFT that we have this belief that pretty much everything that you're experiencing in your life, whether it's chronic pain, a phobia, can't sleep, has an emotional base to it, has an emotional cause to it. So you can absolutely self-tap on these points on the head, body, and face. But if you don't know the language that goes with the EFT tapping, and you don't know how to try to find and identify the core cause of your symptoms, you might experience some relief that will last a few days, maybe a week, but it will happen again. It generally speaking, will resurface again if that core cause wasn't cleared, as we say with EFT. So tapping, what happens is we use the script, which is basically an NLP based script, because Gary Craig, the founder, is a master NLP practitioner. And that's how he streamlined this other technique of TFT, because there wasn't a script with it. And there were many, many tapping combinations with TFT that became confusing to the person trying to do it with themselves. Gary figured out a way with he was an engineer from Stanford, with his engineering mind, to tap on all of the meridian points in one basic combination, one basic recipe. So you don't have to remember all of these different combinations per all the problems that you have, while simultaneously offering you language in this NLP tapping script to help you hopefully identify that core cause. So that way you can stop those symptoms and stop this recurring issue from happening. And when that happens, when you do that tapping and clear that core cause, you'll notice, you will feel it. And you've experienced it with me, Annika. We're safe to say you feel more energized. You feel like you've got these open pathways all of a sudden in your mind, in your spirit, in your body, to do things that you couldn't do before. It's almost like when before you tapped, you had blocked, stuck, stagnant energy just hanging out in there, usually from unprocessed emotions. So when people start tapping, they might notice that they feel hot. They might notice that they feel cold. They might notice that they feel sleepy or tired and are yawning a lot, or they might feel really exhilarated. It depends on the issue that you're tapping on. Depends on how long that issue's been hanging around as well, what your experiences will be when you have these releases, these tapping releases, as we call them. So I hope that answered your question in a nutshell, what it is.
I think, and maybe to give the listeners maybe a little bit of an idea, because what we tapped on for my case, and I've talked about my burnouts before on the show, and basically that with all of our sons, with his birthing story, there was a PTSD related to that. I actually did get that diagnosis, and I saw a ton of therapists for that. And did that help? Yes, to a degree. But when I came to you, I think it's this is how I like to also sometimes explain it to clients. Talk therapy has its place, I personally believe. Yes. But there comes a point where you psychologically understand what happened, and you might be okay to start letting go of some of that anxiety, panic, guilt, shame, whatever it was in your case. Like for me, those were some of the emotions that were attached to that. But there is sometimes you still feel it somehow, or you see the situation and that gets triggered again. And that's sometimes also what happens to people with sleep, right? They want to go to bed. They're actually tired. The moment they hit that pillow, they're like, oh my God, I'm right awake.
Yes.
But there's something happening in your body at that moment and in your brain that is re-triggering an event from at some point back. Who knows when that was? You probably at that point don't, because otherwise, or maybe you do. But that emotion that gets triggered is something that you can get at with EFT without really doing much analysis and talking about it.
Yes.
That's the fascinating thing. You don't have to sit there and talk to a therapist. You just tap through your way through. Can it get emotional? Yes, absolutely. But then you can really feel afterwards how it's out of the system. Like I had moments with you too, where there were certain stories of my life that I couldn't talk about. like they would bring up so much emotion that they were, every time somebody would ask me about it, I would kind of sneak my way out with an answer that's like, oh, I'm fine, don't talk to me about it, in a very polite way so they wouldn't know. Because it was so traumatizing and it was so blocking, and that blocking and energy that sometimes sounds a bit woo, but it absolutely isn't. It's totally scientific. Like, right, we are energy, even though that sounds, it's not, it's like scientific. And if you get that moving, that stuff, so it can come out, I find that is so relieving, and it just calms the system. And like, for my personal experience, it's this, can I talk about my son's story now, or my birthing story with him, without breaking out into tears and being like, oh my God, I need to have 10 minutes by myself to calm myself down? Yes, I can. It's fine, because we've processed it. And it's amazing how this simple tool can do that.
Yeah, it is. You hit some really important points there, and I want to try to remember each one and address what you said on each one. I'm a huge fan and advocate of therapy myself. I've been to many therapists also, and yes, in some regards, I got a lot out of it, and in some places I didn't. What you said is important about EFT, and we have a term for it. We call sneaking up on the trauma, and we've got little T trauma, or little T trauma. We've got big T trauma, especially when we're feeling it's a big T trauma. In the case that you shared regarding your son and his delivery, this is a big T trauma, especially because you got to the place of being diagnosed with PTSD. So what we'll do, we have some certain techniques, one in particular called the movie technique. And when you're, self-tapping, you're more than likely not going to be able to do that. And that's why it's really important oftentimes to work with an EFT practitioner who's trained in these techniques. So we will sneak up on that trauma without you having to talk about it. And while you're tapping and what's going on, what you're tapping about, but you might not necessarily be talking about it because we're sneaking up on it. We're creating this psychological, energetic, and physical distancing from the trauma. The brain, knows what's happening, and the brain automatically wants to go, oh, I can't talk about this. It scares me. I'm freaked out, and feels like a re-triggering is happening. But with EFT, because you're rebalancing those meridians again, and you're working with your energy, the brain goes, whoa, I'm actually safe. Whoa, I can't believe I'm safe. I'm talking about this. I'm looking at it. I'm examining it. I'm working with this person about it. I'm actually safe. And then that's where the shift happens. And also, one of the things I love about the tapping and the basic recipe that we use is it kind of feels like a physical meditation. So it's almost kind of like spellbinding. You almost feel like you're being hypnotized a little bit as you keep going through these rounds of the tapping. And that then also makes it feel easier to process those old emotions, or even new emotions, because there might still be some new emotions around them. And that piece is really, really important. And that's why it works. You also said something around, wanting to avoid, when people bring up those triggers. And when you bring that topic to a practitioner, one of the things that we keep hammering on while we're tapping is, do you feel safe? Are you safe right now? So we're hyper focused, if you will, on the emotional and mental and physical safety that you experience. I think also even using that word makes the person feel safer. We also have that script I told you about, and we use certain language like, even though I have this fear, or even though I have this trauma, I'm safe now. I'm safe right now in this moment. And what we're doing is not ignoring then the part that feels unsafe, while simultaneously acknowledging I can be safe right now, right here. So we're addressing and honoring both sides of you. And that's where the brain starts to calm down and goes, oh, hey, I'm being acknowledged and honored and respected. I've been trying to keep myself safe here, but sometimes those safety tactics, they're not working anymore. And in EFT, we call that secondary gain, or, perceived payoff, that if I keep behaving this way, I'm keeping myself safe. But at the end of the day, maybe not, if you're not sleeping or you're having interrupted sleep, for example. I love that you shared your story, because you had a massive breakthrough in one session, literally, if that's okay to share.
Oh, yeah.
That's how powerful EFT is. You may have been struggling for years with the same topic and issue, and then you get with an EFT practitioner and it's like, boom, gone. The founder of EFT would call them like 1-minute wonders. And that's how it feels. It's like, oh my God, that's all it took was some tapping on my body and my face.
Exactly. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I think for people who, like how we were just describing this, make the brain feel safe, right? Yeah. That's something when we look at sleep. Yes, we look at the physiological part of what's underlying potentially that keeps you awake, but we also know that everybody has, as soon as you have experienced sleep issues for a few weeks and you can't get them to resolve, you start telling yourself these stories, and they might be subconscious, right? Yeah. And then you get that anxiety of, oh my God, is this going to be another bad night? Am I not going to be able to function tomorrow? And it's horrible. And it becomes this vicious cycle. And tapping is just one of those ways where I think it can really support that anxiety to come down, right? Is that something you would agree with?
I 100% agree with you. And by the way, each point signifies something different. So for example, the wrist point, and for listeners who can't see what I'm doing, because I know this is on YouTube, and oh my goodness, someone's ringing my bell. Oh, cute. The wrist point is for anxiety. So you can tap with both wrists together, the wrists facing each other and tapping together, or you can just tap on the inside of the wrist as well as the outside of the wrist. You have your choice, what makes you feel more comfortable. So we have this basic recipe that we do, which is like hitting up all of the meridian points in one kind of formula, but each tapping point represents something different. And so, for example, if you're in the workplace and you notice this anxiety pop up, you can just start tapping on the wrist, because more than likely you're not going to be able to do the whole tapping formula in front of all of your colleagues in a meeting, right? But you can discreetly under the desk, tap on your wrist, and that will start to bring that anxiety down. What it is with each of these tapping points is they're also associated, these meridian points are associated with organs in the body. Mm-hmm. And that's where we run into that stuck, stagnant, locked energy. Over time, if you have emotions that are not processed, emotions are energy in motion, and they will continue to stack up, and they've got to go somewhere. That energy's got to be stored somewhere in the body. So they'll tend to store, for example, in the spleen or the liver or in the stomach or in the heart. And each of our tapping points correlate with those organs. And if you look at Chinese medicine, but you'll also look now in Western medicine, there have been a lot of studies around emotions and cultures and how they perceive emotions and where they believe emotions are connected in the body. It's all lining up, as you said earlier. So we find oftentimes, obviously, that anger is in the belly, right? Sadness and sorrow and grief is housed and stored in the heart, for example. So if you have long periods of unprocessed anger, or in this example, long periods of unprocessed sadness or grief, right, in the heart, it will build up there. And what happens with tapping, active tapping, is it starts to loosen up all that stagnation. And when you experience the loosening up of that stagnation, that's when you feel redirected and balanced again. And you kind of feel like yourself again. And then the sleep starts to become better and more regulated, for example. And lots of these other payoffs, like more confidence, more assurance, more focus and clarity.
Absolutely. It's absolutely phenomenal. I find fascinating. Yeah. Laurie, can we tap? Could we?
Yes.
Could we tap with the audience? Like if they wanted to do it, they could follow along. Can we try?
Yeah, of course. And what I'll do for just for the listeners on the podcast, since they can't see us, then I'm going to name the tapping point. So that way they can follow along with us, even though they can't see us. So what we'll do is we'll make this really generic, just as a demo, but please feel free to use your own words and change the word when you're saying it out loud and tapping with me. So we'll do a little generic script, like, even though I have this problem, I accept myself anyway. But if you want to change the word problem to, even though I'm having trouble sleeping, or even though I'm scared to sleep, please feel free to change the language to that. All right, Annika, so you join me and everybody else. We're going to start at the side of the hand. And for those that are listening and can't see, we call this the karate chop point. So it's that fleshy side of your hand, and you can just tap with all 4 fingers or just 2 fingers of your opposite hand if that feels good for you. If you cannot tap because you don't have the use of your hands, you don't have hands, or you don't have arms, for example, because that often happens, you can imagine someone tapping on you, or ask someone to tap on you, by the way. Or if you have a restriction with one hand, you can use like an instrument, like a soft pencil with an eraser, to tap on your hand instead. Okay, so go ahead and start repeating after me as you're simultaneously tapping on the side of your hand. And we're going to do this 3 times, this particular setup statement, which goes, even though I have this problem,
I have this problem,
I accept myself anyway.
I accept myself anyway.
Even though
I
have this problem,
I have this problem,
I choose to accept myself anyway.
I choose to accept myself anyway.
Even though
I
have this problem,
I have this problem,
I accept myself anyway.
I accept myself anyway.
All right, join me at the top of the head. It's like right in the middle of your head, that little soft spot. This problem. Now we're going to go inside the eyebrows. This problem. And just hang out with me here at the inside of the eyebrow point for a moment. I want you to think about that problem. Just kind of notice where you feel it. Where do you feel it in your body? You don't have to say that out loud or anything. It's just noticing the feeling, noticing the emotion. That part is important with EFT tapping. And we're going to go to the side of the eyes. It's not the temples, it's the side of the eyes. That's right. This problem. Now we're going to go under the eyes on the bony bits. This problem. And let's just pause there again for a moment. And I want you to think about a belief that you might have about that problem. And just kind of notice where you feel that belief in your body as we're still tapping under the eye. Now join me at the nose, under the nose, this problem. We're going to go on the chin, that divot point, that indentation, this problem. You might be noticing you're taking some deep breaths. You might notice a runny nose. You might notice some tears, and that's all normal releasing in EFT. Now we're going to come onto the chest, right under the collarbone, like about 1 centimeter down and over, about 1 centimeter over this problem. And again, tune in, see if the energy is changing. Are you feeling different? You might notice an increase or a spike in the feelings, and that's okay. It just means the energy is shifting and changing. You might notice a decrease, and of course, that's what we're going for, is a decrease in the stress or the anxiety that you have about the problem. And then we're going to go under the arm. For us ladies, that's at the bra strap. And you can do it with 2 hands under both arms, or just 1 is okay, because the meridians run on both sides of the body. This problem. Nice deep breath in and out. We'll finish up at the top of the head again. This problem. I always like to invite people tapping with me then to just place their hands on their heart and close their eyes and just tune into what they notice after that first round. What's changed, what's here now. So how was it for you? Yeah, how was it? Did you feel a shift or notice anything, Annika?
You know what, I find even though I did it with the problem, and I didn't, because I think it's important to put a problem there. Like if you're anxious, say, even though I'm anxious, or even though I'm nervous, or whatever, I'm afraid or something. Then I think you feel an even bigger shift. But even now I find it's like, it grounds you.
Yeah.
It makes you just relaxed.
Yeah.
It already makes that anxiety go down.
It does, right? And it's really interesting because even though I was facilitating and guiding that, when we took that moment and I placed my hands on my heart, I could feel my energy was different. Like I could kind of feel that buzzing feeling, but also it felt really anchored and centered, just saying something generic. So
Yeah.
that physical part of tapping is always also working. It's incredible. And also, we're trained that even if you use just generic phraseology, because sometimes you have to, especially if it's like a big T trauma, it doesn't matter. It still works because the person who's tapping knows what they're tapping about. On that conscious level, you're aware. So good. I'm glad you felt some calm happening. Nice.
Thank you so much. If people wanted to find out more about you or EFT, where would you guide them?
Yeah, they can check me out at Instagram. I'm really active there. And my handle is Life Coach Laurie, and I spell my name Laurie. So they can find me at Life Coach Laurie at Instagram or at my website, lifecoachlaurie.com. And you can always do a sample, one-to-one private sample session with me to, test it out, feel tapping, and I'm guiding you the whole time. So that way you can kind of go, is this for me? Do I like it? I don't know. Is it weird? Well, it's weird, but it's working. So that's another thing to try. Or, you know what? I've got a safer way. I've got a micro course called Manifest with Purpose, which is at my lifecoachlaurie.com, where I've got pre-recorded videos. You never have to talk to me. It's really economically friendly, and you can tap along with me in those videos. So that's another way, Annika.
Yeah, and I would really, if that's something that speaks to you, go try it out, because it's like you say, it might be awkward, like it might be weird the first time you do it, but it does work. And it's just such a great way for people to clear past trauma or clear stresses out of the body, or if we're talking about sleep, calm yourself down either directly prior to bed, or if you're somebody who has a bit of a anxiety thing with sleep, like a few hours before bed, to get that worrying out of the system, so to give that body time to really calm down in the evening.
Yes.
It's really, really a great and easy tool. It doesn't take a long time.
No.
And you will get into it and you'll feel that point where you're like, oh, I'm okay now, I'm good.
Yeah.
Or no, I'm going to do just one more round because I'm still a bit on edge here. You'll figure that out. And it's just something I'd highly, highly recommend to check out, because it's just so powerful.
Listen, I'll tell you, I tap myself, I tap with myself, and I have a tapping buddy who's a trained practitioner, and we swap sessions because even trained practitioners need help and support and have their own traumas as well. And one thing we didn't talk about, and I'll leave you with this, is oftentimes people are not sleeping because they're not living their dreams. They're not living their purpose. They're not living their true selves. They've been conditioned in a certain way that they need to live their life this way, but it goes against their own grain, and their soul is like crying out. And that's why oftentimes they're not sleeping. So tapping, EFT, is fantastic for getting to the heart of that matter, clearing that, moving through that imposter syndrome and conditioning, and helping you live your life purpose and your dreams. And that's another thing I feel is really important to mention.
Absolutely. It's a really, really big one.
And that's still sleep, big time when you're...
Big time.
Yeah, massively.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Laurie.
Thank you, Annika.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward to our next tapping session. And I will write all Laurie's contacts in the show notes, so you can just click on it and check her out, and let us know your experience with tapping. I really want to know how you felt about it. And we'll see you next time.
Oh, thank you.